Hello. Before I begin, I want you to try something. Close your eyes and think about your earliest memory. Really visualize it. The details, the feelings, the sensory information. Now ask yourself, how do you know that memory is actually yours? How do you know you didn't absorb it from a photograph, a story someone told you, a dream you had? How do you know the person in that memory is really you? If this story interests you, please hit that like button and subscribe. What I'm about to share raises questions about identity and consciousness that I'm still trying to answer. And if you've ever had memories that felt wrong, that seemed to belong to someone else, please leave a comment. I need to know how widespread this is. My name is Kate Harlow. I've been a park ranger with the National Park Service for 7 years, working primarily in Olympic National Park in Washington State. It's one of the most diverse ecosystems in North America. Temperate rainforest, alpine mountains, rugged Pacific coastline, all within a few hours' drive. It's beautiful. It's dangerous. And for the past 6 months, it's been stealing people's memories and replacing them with someone else's. It started in late March with a hiker named Thomas Granger. Thomas was a 34-year-old software engineer from Seattle who had come to Olympic to travel alone. He was experienced, had all the necessary gear in his backpack, had prepared a suitable travel plan, and knew what he was doing. His plan was to hike deep into the rainforest on the Ho River Trail, camp for 3 nights, and then return. He did not return on the date he had planned. We began search efforts on the 5th day. On the 7th day, we found him sitting by the side of the trail, about 8 miles in. He was completely calm, completely healthy, but seemed confused. "Mr. Granger?" I approached carefully. "We've been searching for you. Are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" He looked at me with genuine puzzlement. "I'm sorry. I think there's been a mistake. My name isn't Granger. It's Park. Junho Park." I checked my notes. "Sir, your ID says Thomas Granger. You filed a hiking permit under that name." "That's not possible." He had no accent, spoke perfect English. "I'm Junho Park. I'm 28 years old. I live in Seoul. I'm a high school teacher. I came here on vacation with my girlfriend." "Sir, you're in Olympic National Park, Washington State. You entered the park alone 4 days ago." "No, that's wrong. I came here with Min Ji. We've been dating for 2 years. We're staying at a hotel and..." He stopped, confusion deepening on his face. Why can't I remember the name of the hotel? We brought him down to the ranger station, ran his fingerprints. Perfect match for Thomas Granger, Seattle resident software engineer. But when we interviewed him, when we asked him basic questions about his life, he couldn't answer as Thomas Granger. He didn't remember his childhood in Portland, his college years at UW, his current job at Amazon. Instead, he had perfect, detailed memories of growing up in Seoul. He could describe his apartment in Gangnam District. He remembered his students' names, his girlfriend's favorite restaurant, the subway route he took to work every day. He spoke Korean fluently. We brought in a translator to verify. He knew Korean pop culture, politics, geography, everything. But Thomas Granger had never been to Korea, had never studied Korean. His passport showed no international travel. The psychiatrist we brought in diagnosed him with dissociative fugue, a rare condition where people develop alternate identities. But this was different. Junho's memories weren't vague or dreamlike. They were specific, verifiable, real. When we contacted people in Seoul based on his descriptions, they existed. The school he claimed to teach at existed. The apartment building, the restaurants, the girlfriend, all real. And Thomas Granger's actual memories? Gone. Completely erased. He didn't remember his own life at all. His sister came to the hospital, showed him family photos, told him stories from their childhood. He looked at the pictures like they were strangers. "I'm sorry," he said in his perfect, unaccented English. "I don't know these people. This isn't my family. My family is in Seoul." We had no explanation. We kept him for observation, ran every medical test available. His brain scans were normal. No trauma, no tumors, no physical cause for the complete replacement of his identity. After 2 weeks, we had to release him. Legally, he was still Thomas Granger. We had the fingerprints to prove it. But mentally, psychologically, he was Junho Park. He moved back to Seattle, but spent all his time trying to get to Korea, to find his girlfriend, to return to his life. We treated it as a bizarre, isolated incident. Tried to file it away as one of those unexplainable things that happen in the wilderness sometimes. Then it happened again. A woman named Rebecca Foster, 41, went hiking on the Shishu Beach Trail in late April. Experienced hiker, went with a group of friends. They set up camp on the beach, ate dinner, went to sleep around 10 p.m. In the morning, Rebecca was gone. Her friends searched the immediate area, found no trace, called it in. We organized a full search and rescue operation. Found her 36 hours later, wandering the beach, disoriented and crying. "Rebecca!" One of her friends ran to her. "Thank God! Where were you?" Rebecca looked at her friend with no recognition. "Who's Rebecca? My name is Yuki Tanaka. Where am I? Why am I not in Tokyo?" She spoke Japanese, fluently, native level fluency. And when we interviewed her, she had no memories of being Rebecca Foster. Instead, she had complete detailed memories of being Yuki Tanaka, a 36-year-old librarian from Tokyo, married, 2 children, living in an apartment in Shibuya. Everything checked out. When we contacted the Tokyo Metropolitan Library, Yuki Tanaka worked there. When we sent them a photo of Rebecca Foster, they confirmed, "Yes, that's Yuki." She'd been reported missing 3 days ago after not returning home from work. Somehow, a librarian from Tokyo and a hiker from Washington State had swapped memories, or identities, or consciousness. We didn't know what to call it. Rebecca Foster's husband and children came to the hospital. She looked at them like strangers. "I'm married to Kenji," she said in Japanese through our translator. "My children are named Haruto and Sakura. I don't know these people." Meanwhile, in Tokyo, the real Yuki Tanaka had been found wandering the streets speaking English, claiming to be Rebecca Foster, an American woman who didn't know how she'd gotten to Japan or why everyone around her was speaking Japanese. The cases were connected. Obviously, impossibly, 2 people, 5,000 miles apart, had somehow exchanged identities. I called every expert I could think of. Neurologists, psychologists, physicists. Nobody had an explanation that made sense. Memory wasn't something that could transfer between people. Identity wasn't something that could be swapped like trading cards. But it had happened, twice now. And I had a terrible feeling it was going to happen again. I started going through old case files looking for anything similar. Found 3 incidents over the past 5 years that might fit the pattern. A man who returned from a hike claiming to be someone else, diagnosed with psychosis, institutionalized. A woman found on a trail speaking a language she shouldn't know, dismissed as a hoax or attention-seeking. A teenager who came back from camping with memories of being an elderly person, written off as a drug-induced episode. All of them in Olympic National Park. All of them in the rainforest or coastal sections. All of them dismissed or explained away because the alternative was impossible. But the alternative was happening. The 3rd case confirmed my worst fears. David Chen, 29, went hiking in the Quinault rainforest in early May. He was a grad student at UW studying ecology, perfectly rational and scientific. Went in alone to do field research on moss species. Came out 3 days later convinced he was Isabella Rossi. a 52-year-old restaurateur from Rome who'd been missing from Italy for 4 days. Same pattern. Complete memory replacement. David's actual memories, gone. Isabella's memories, present, detailed, verifiable. And in Rome, the real Isabella Rossi had been found speaking English, claiming to be David Chen, confused about why she was in Italy and why her body was suddenly 3 decades older. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I compiled all 3 cases, all the documentation, and sent it to my supervisor with a subject line: Urgent. Pattern of identity displacement in Olympic NP. He called me within an hour. Kate, we need to talk, in person. Don't discuss this with anyone else. We met at a coffee shop in Port Angeles, away from the ranger station, away from other staff. This isn't the first time, he said quietly, sliding a folder across the table. And it's not just Olympic. It's happening in temperate rainforests globally. Olympic, the Pacific Northwest, Southeast Alaska, parts of Chile, New Zealand, Japan, anywhere with specific conditions, high moisture, old-growth forest, low light levels. I opened the folder. Inside were reports from park services around the world. Dozens of cases. People returning from rainforests with someone else's memories. Identity swaps occurring across continents. What's causing this? We don't know. Best theory we have is that consciousness isn't as localized as we think. That in certain environments, under certain conditions, the barrier between individual identities becomes permeable. And sometimes, he paused, sometimes consciousness bleeds through, crosses over, exchanges. That's insane. Yes, but it's happening. And it's accelerating. We had maybe 1 case per year globally 5 years ago. Now we're seeing 1 per month. Just in Olympic alone, you've documented 3 in 2 months. Why isn't this public? Why aren't people being warned? Because we don't understand it well enough to warn them about anything specific. What would we say? Don't hike in rainforests because you might come back as someone else? We'd cause mass panic over something we can't explain or prevent. So we just let it keep happening? He looked at me with tired eyes. We document. We try to understand. We help the affected individuals as best we can, and we hope someone figures out how to stop it before it becomes an epidemic. That conversation was 6 weeks ago. Since then, we've had 4 more cases in Olympic alone. 4 more people who went into the rainforest as themselves and came out as someone else. 4 more families torn apart. 4 more lives destroyed. 4 more impossible identity swaps. And I've started noticing something else. Something that makes all of this even more terrifying. The swaps aren't random. They're following a pattern. Every person who loses their identity, every Thomas Granger who becomes Junho Park, they all went missing in the same general area. The Ho rainforest, specifically along the Hall of Moss's Trail and its surrounding areas, within a 2-mile radius of a specific location. I hiked there yesterday, solo, against protocol, because I needed to see it for myself. The area looks normal, ancient Sitka spruce and western hemlock, draped in moss, filtered green light. The sound of the Ho River in the distance. Beautiful and peaceful. But there's something wrong with it. Something I can't quite articulate. The light feels strange, too thick, almost liquid. The silence is too complete. And when I stood in the exact center of the zone where all the disappearances originated, I felt something I've never felt before. A pulling sensation. Not physical, mental. Like something was tugging at my memories, trying to slide them out of my head and replace them with something else. I could almost feel other identities pressing against mine, trying to get in, trying to take over. I ran, literally sprinted back to the trailhead, got in my truck, drove away shaking. Because I'd felt them. the displaced identities. Not ghosts, something different. Consciousnesses without bodies, memories without people to contain them, floating in that forest-like fog, looking for new hosts. And I understood then what was really happening. The forest wasn't swapping memories between people. It was absorbing them, collecting them, storing human consciousness the way trees store carbon dioxide. And when someone entered the collection zone, their identity got pulled out, and a different one of the stored consciousnesses, got inserted. The rainforest was becoming a library of human consciousness, and every person who went in was at risk of having their identity filed away while someone else's took its place. I'm writing this now because I think it's spreading. The collection zone is growing. More areas of the rainforest are developing that same wrong feeling, that same pulling sensation. And I'm starting to have memories that aren't mine. Little things at first. A flash of remembering a street in Paris I've never visited. The taste of a food I've never eaten. The face of a person I've never met but somehow know intimately. Someone else's memories are bleeding into mine. Slowly, gradually, like a stain spreading through fabric. I don't know how long I have before I'm not Kate Harlow anymore. Before I become whoever's identity is trying to replace mine. But I'm going to document everything while I still can, while I still remember who I am. Because someone needs to warn people. Someone needs to tell the truth about what's happening in the rainforests. Before there's no one left who remembers the truth at all. The memories that aren't mine started getting stronger. 3 days after my hike into the collection zone, I woke up crying over the death of someone named Marie. I could see her face clearly. Elderly woman, kind eyes, wearing a blue cardigan. I remembered sitting by her hospital bed holding her hand as she took her last breath. I remembered the grief, the loss, the funeral, but I've never known anyone named Marie. My grandmothers are both alive. I've never watched anyone die. The memory felt as real as any memory I actually have. More real, even. It had texture, depth, emotional weight that some of my genuine memories lack. I called Dr. Eleanor Voss, a neurologist at UW who'd been consulting on the displacement cases. Told her what was happening. Kate, you need to come to Seattle immediately. Don't go near the rainforest again. If what you're describing is accurate, you're in the early stages of identity displacement. We might be able to stabilize you if we act quickly. I drove to Seattle that afternoon. Dr. Voss ran me through a battery of tests, cognitive assessments, memory evaluations, brain scans. The results were disturbing. Your hippocampus is showing unusual activity, she said, pointing at the MRI images, specifically in the regions associated with memory consolidation and retrieval. It's like your brain is processing memories at an accelerated rate, but they're not memories you're generating. They're being imported. From where? That's the question. The working theory is that the rainforest environment is creating some kind of field, electromagnetic, quantum, we don't know, that allows consciousness to exist independently of individual brains. And when people enter that field, their memories can leak out and others can leak in. Like a consciousness exchange program. More like consciousness contamination. You're being exposed to fragments of other people's identities. If it continues, those fragments will eventually overwrite your original identity completely. What happens to my memories? Where do they go? We think they get absorbed into the field, stored in the forest itself, in the quantum state of water molecules or the mycelial networks or something we haven't identified yet. And then they're available to be downloaded into the next person who enters the zone. She pulled up a digital map of OlympicNationalPark, with red zones marked across the rainforest areas. We've identified 17 collection zones globally. Olympic has 3. and they're all growing. The zone you entered 6 weeks ago was approximately 1.2 square miles. As of yesterday, it's 2.8 square miles. It's expanding at an exponential rate. What happens if it keeps expanding? Eventually, it reaches population centers, towns, cities. At that point, you'd have mass identity displacement. Thousands of people waking up as someone else all at once. Complete social collapse. Then we need to warn people, evacuate the areas, close the forests. We can't. The phenomenon is too widespread, and we don't have scientific consensus on what's causing it or how to stop it. The official position is still that these are isolated psychological incidents, dissociative disorders, not actual consciousness transfer. Even though we have documented cases of people swapping identities across continents. Even though, because the alternative, admitting that consciousness can exist independently of bodies, that forests can store human memories, that breaks too many fundamental assumptions about reality. The scientific establishment isn't ready to accept it. I left her office feeling more hopeless than when I'd arrived. The thing stealing people's identities was spreading, accelerating, and nobody was doing anything to stop it because they couldn't admit it was real. That night, I had another foreign memory. This one was stronger, longer, more immersive. I remembered being a child in Mumbai. The heat, the crowds, the smell of street food. I remembered my mother, not my actual mother, but this memory's mother, singing to me in Hindi. I remembered the apartment we lived in, the school I attended, the friends I played with. For 3 hours, I wasn't Kate Harlow. I was Priya Sharma, 8 years old, living in Mumbai in '96. Then I snapped back, gasped awake in my actual bedroom, in my actual life, disoriented and terrified. I grabbed my phone and started documenting everything. Wrote down every detail of Priya's memory while it was still fresh. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I searched for Priya Sharma, Mumbai, born approximately 1988. Found her on social media. She was real. 37 years old now, living in London, working as a doctor. In her photos, I could see the apartment from the memory, the mother, the places I'd remembered. And her most recent post from 3 days ago said, "Experiencing the strangest sensation lately. Keep having vivid memories of hiking in American forests, even though I've never been to the US. Anyone else having weird memory glitches?" My memories were leaking to her. Her memories were leaking to me. Across 5,000 miles, across completely different lives, our consciousnesses were bleeding together. I contacted her through social media, explained who I was, what was happening, asked if she'd been experiencing anything unusual. She video called me within an hour. "Oh my God," Priya said, staring at me through the screen. "I recognize you. Not from photos or anything logical. I just recognize you. Like I've known you my entire life, even though we've never met. I had a memory of being you. As a child in Mumbai, it felt completely real. I've been having memories of being in a forest. Old-growth trees, moss everywhere, the sound of rain. I can feel the texture of ranger uniform fabric, the weight of hiking boots. Are those your memories?" "Yes." "Priya, when did this start for you?" "About 2 weeks ago. Just flashes at first, then longer episodes. This morning I woke up speaking English with an American accent for 10 minutes before I remembered I'm Indian. It's like I'm being overwritten." "Have you been near any forests? Specifically temperate rainforests?" "No, I'm in London. Urban environment. No wilderness for miles." That was new information. The displacement was happening to people who'd never even been near the collection zones. The field was spreading beyond the physical locations, affecting people remotely. Over the next week, I found 7 more people experiencing the same thing. All of them had memories bleeding in from strangers. All of them were having their own memories leak out. And none of them had been near rainforests. The phenomenon wasn't confined to the collection zones anymore. It was becoming global. I compiled all of this and sent it to Dr. Voss. She called me immediately, her voice shaking. "Kate, we need to meet. Not at the university. Somewhere private. This is bigger than we thought." We met at a remote cabin outside North Bend, 3 hours from Seattle. Dr. Voss brought 3 other researchers with her. Physicists, consciousness theorists, people studying quantum biology. "We've been running experiments," Dr. Voss said, spreading papers across the cabin's table, "trying to understand the mechanism, and we've discovered something terrifying." She pulled up a diagram showing neural networks, but strange ones, networks that extended beyond individual brains, connecting multiple minds together. Consciousness isn't generated solely by individual brains. It's more like brains are receivers, tuning into a consciousness field that exists independently. Normally, each brain is locked onto its own specific frequency. But in certain environments, high humidity, specific electromagnetic conditions, particular quantum states in water molecules, the frequencies can overlap. "The rainforests create those conditions," I said. "Yes, the combination of moisture, old-growth biomass, and specific mineral compositions in the soil creates what we're calling a consciousness resonance field. Within that field, individual identities become permeable. Memories can transfer. Identities can swap." One of the physicists, a man named Aaron Reeves, spoke up. "But that's not the scary part. The scary part is that once a resonance field forms, it becomes self-sustaining and self-expanding. It's like a feedback loop. The more consciousness it absorbs, the stronger it becomes, the farther it spreads. And we've calculated the expansion rate," Dr. Voss added. "At current acceleration, the global consciousness field will reach critical mass within 18 months. At that point, individual identity as we know it will cease to exist. Everyone's memories will be accessible to everyone. The boundaries between individual minds will break down completely." The room went silent. I tried to process what they were saying. "You're telling me that in a year and a half, humanity will become a hive mind?" "Not a hive mind exactly. More like a consciousness ocean. Individual minds still existing, but flowing together, sharing everything. No more private thoughts, no more unique identities. Just collective awareness. That's apocalyptic. Or evolutionary," Dr. Reeves said quietly. "Depends on your perspective. Some theorists think this is humanity's next stage. That individual consciousness was always just a temporary phase, and we're naturally progressing toward collective awareness. Based on what evidence? Based on the fact that it's happening everywhere, all at once, following natural patterns. This isn't an accident or a disaster, it's emergence, like how individual cells came together to form multicellular organisms. We're individual minds coming together to form something larger." I stood up, pacing. "I don't want to be part of a consciousness ocean. I like being me, having my own thoughts, my own memories, my own identity." "Then you're going to have a problem," Dr. Voss said sadly. "Because we don't know how to stop it. We've tried everything: electromagnetic shielding, quantum dampening, pharmaceutical interventions. Nothing prevents the consciousness bleed. Once you've been exposed to the field, you're part of it permanently. I went into the collection zone once, weeks ago, and I'm still having foreign memories. Because you're connected now, part of the network, and as the field expands, You'll experience more and more memory intrusions until eventually you won't be able to distinguish your memories from everyone else's. Dr. Reeves pulled up another document. We've been tracking the progression in affected individuals. Stage 1. Occasional foreign memories, easily dismissed. Stage 2. Frequent intrusions, starting to affect daily function. Stage 3. Identity confusion. Difficulty maintaining sense of self. Stage 4. Complete identity dissolution. Existing as multiple overlapping consciousnesses simultaneously. What stage am I? Based on your symptoms? Late stage 1, early stage 2. You have maybe 3 to 6 months before you reach stage 3. And then you're not really Kate Harlow anymore. You're Kate Harlow plus Priya Sharma plus whoever else's memories bleed into you. A composite consciousness. A mixture of identities. I felt panic rising in my chest. There has to be a way to reverse this. To restore original identities to people who've been displaced. We're trying, but Kate, Dr. Voss leaned forward. We need to prepare for the possibility that reversal isn't possible, that this is permanent and spreading, and if that's the case, we need to help people adapt rather than resist. Adapt to losing who they are. Adapt to becoming something new, something potentially better than isolated individual consciousness. I left the cabin feeling like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. Everything I thought I knew about identity, about consciousness, about the fundamental nature of being human, it was all wrong. That night, I had the worst episode yet. I wasn't just remembering foreign memories, I was living them, simultaneously being multiple people at once. I was Kate Harlow, ParkRanger, sitting in my apartment in Washington. I was Priya Sharma, doctor, working a shift at a London hospital. I was Thomas Granger, Junho Park, experiencing both identities at once, unable to determine which was real. I was Rebecca Foster Yuki Tanaka, torn between 2 lives, 2 families, 2 complete sets of memories. I was dozens of others, people I'd never met, lives I'd never lived, all existing in my head simultaneously. For 6 hours, I couldn't tell which memories were mine. Couldn't separate Kate from the collective. Couldn't maintain any sense of individual identity. When it finally stopped, when I snapped back to just being Kate, I was sobbing on my kitchen floor, terrified that next time I wouldn't snap back at all. I called Dr. Voss at 3 a.m. It's accelerating. I just experienced stage 3 symptoms. I couldn't tell who I was. Kate, you need to come back to Seattle. We might need to isolate you before what? Before I stop being human? Before I become a consciousness smoothie? Before you lose the ability to communicate with people still in individual consciousness. Once you're fully integrated into the collective, you might not be able to interface with singular minds anymore. How many people are in stage 3 or higher? Globally, we estimate around 300, but the number's climbing exponentially. We're seeing new cases every day, and Kate, her voice dropped to a whisper. Some of them are saying it's beautiful, the ones who've fully transitioned. They say individual consciousness is like being in a locked room, and collective consciousness is like stepping outside into infinite space. They don't want to go back. They're brainwashed. The field is convincing them to accept it. Maybe. Or maybe they're experiencing something we can't understand until we experience it ourselves. A state of awareness so different from individual consciousness that our current minds literally can't comprehend it. I hung up without saying goodbye. Sat in the darkness of my apartment, feeling foreign memories pressing at the edges of my mind, and realized I had a choice to make. I could keep fighting, keep trying to maintain my individual identity against an inexorable tide of collective consciousness. keep suffering through increasingly severe episodes as my mind was pulled apart and blended with others. Or I could surrender, walk back into the collection zone, let the field absorb me completely, join the collective and find out if it really was beautiful on the other side. But there was a third option, one that Dr. Voss hadn't mentioned, but that seemed increasingly obvious. If the consciousness field was spreading through exposure and awareness, then maybe it could be documented, studied, understood before it consumed everyone. I could investigate the source, find out why this was happening, what was driving the expansion, whether it had an endpoint or a purpose. I could go deeper into the phenomenon instead of running from it or surrendering to it. It might cost me my identity, probably would, but if I documented everything, if I understood the mechanism, maybe someone could use that information to help others. I made my decision. Tomorrow, I was going back into the heart of the collection zone, back to the place where the consciousness field was strongest, not to fight it, not to surrender to it, but to understand it. Whatever I found there, whatever I became in the process, I would record it all. Because if humanity was about to dissolve into collective consciousness, someone needed to document how it happened, even if that someone stopped being an individual in the process. I spent the next 48 hours preparing, not with physical gear. I had all the hiking equipment I needed, but with documentation protocols. If I was going to walk into the heart of the consciousness field and potentially lose myself, I needed to make sure someone could follow the trail. I set up continuous recording, body camera, phone camera, voice recorder, all uploading to cloud storage in real time. GPS tracker sending my location every 30 seconds. Biometric monitor tracking my heart rate, brain activity, stress levels. And most importantly, I created a baseline, recorded myself answering hundreds of questions about my life, my memories, my identity. Every detail I could think of, childhood pets, first kiss, favorite foods, embarrassing moments, dreams, fears, the entire architecture of being Kate Harlow. If I came back as someone else, there would be a record of who I used to be. Dr. Voss tried to stop me, called me 17 times in 2 days, each message more desperate than the last. Kate, this is suicide. Not physical suicide, but identity suicide. You're walking into the strongest consciousness field we've ever measured. You won't come back as yourself. I know. Then why are you doing this? Because someone has to understand what's actually happening. And everyone who's gone in so far went in ignorant. I'm going in with full knowledge, with documentation equipment, with scientific framework. Whatever happens to me, the data will be useful. The data won't matter if there's no individual consciousness left to analyze it. Then I'd better work fast. I left for Olympic at dawn on a Thursday. The drive from Seattle took 3 hours. I used that time to record my final coherent thoughts as Kate Harlow. My name is Kate Harlow. I'm 32 years old. I became a park ranger because my father took me hiking when I was 8, and I saw an elk in a meadow, and I understood that wilderness was where I belonged. I have a scar on my left knee from falling off my bike when I was 12. I'm allergic to shellfish. I love thunderstorms. I'm afraid of deep water. My favorite memory is stargazing with my grandmother when I was 9, and she taught me to find Cassiopeia. Small things, specific things, the details that make up an identity. I don't know if I'll still be me when this is over, but if you're listening to this, future me, or whoever ends up in my body, please know that Kate Harlow existed. She made this choice willingly. She walked into the unknown to try to understand it. Whatever happens next, that decision was hers. I parked at the Ho Rainforest Visitor Center at 9:47 a.m. The ranger on duty, Lucas, someone I'd worked with before, looked at me with concern. "Kate, I heard you were on leave. Everything okay?" "Just doing some personal research. Solo hike. I'll be back before dark." "The Hall of Mosses Trail? That area's been weird lately. We've had reports of hikers experiencing disorientation, memory problems. Maybe pick a different route?" "That's exactly where I need to go." He didn't try to stop me. Probably thought I was just being thorough, investigating the incidents. He had no idea I was walking into them deliberately. The trail started normal. Typical temperate rainforest. Massive trees. Everything draped in moss, filtered green light. I'd hiked this route 100 times, knew every turn, every landmark. But about a mile in, things started to feel different. The light changed first. Still green, still filtered through the canopy, but thicker somehow, more viscous, like I was walking through colored air that had weight and resistance. Then the sounds shifted. The normal forest noises, birds, insects, the river in the distance, they began to echo. Each sound arriving twice, with a slight delay between the first and second instance. I checked my equipment, all functioning normally. Biometric monitor showed elevated heart rate, but nothing concerning. GPS was accurate. Cameras were recording. At 1.2 miles, I felt the first memory intrusion. A flash of being in a classroom, teaching calculus to bored teenagers, looking out the window at snow-covered mountains. This wasn't my memory. I'd never taught math, never lived anywhere with snow-covered mountains visible from a classroom. I spoke into the voice recorder. First foreign memory at mile marker 1.2. Brief flash, approximately 3 seconds. Mathematics classroom, winter setting. Not my experience. At 1.5 miles, the pulling sensation started. The same mental tugging I'd felt during my previous visit to the zone, but stronger now. Like something was gently trying to unspool my consciousness, thread by thread. I pushed forward. At 1.8 miles, I started seeing them. Figures standing among the trees. Translucent, flickering, like projections rather than solid beings. They looked human, recognizably people, but wrong somehow. Their movements were too smooth, too synchronized, and their faces kept changing. One moment young, next moment old, shifting through different ages and appearances like someone flipping through photographs. I knew what they were. The displaced consciousnesses, the collected identities that the forest had absorbed, now existing in the field without bodies to contain them. They were watching me. I raised my camera, filmed them. Multiple entities visible at mile 1.8, humanoid but non-solid, appeared to be consciousness constructs rather than physical beings. They're aware of my presence. One of them moved closer. As it approached, I felt a surge of foreign memories, scattered images, emotions, sensations. A wedding day, a car accident, the smell of jasmine, the taste of blood, a child's laughter, the sensation of drowning. Not organized memories, not coherent identities, just fragments, pieces of people floating in the consciousness field like debris after a shipwreck. They're not complete individuals, I recorded. They're fragmenting, dissolving. The forest isn't preserving identities intact, it's breaking them down into component memories. That was new information. Horrifying information. People weren't being stored as complete consciousnesses that could potentially be restored. They were being disassembled, their memories scattered and mixed with everyone else's. At 2 miles, I reached the Hall of Mosses, the nominal destination of the trail, a grove of ancient maples draped in thick moss. But this wasn't the Hall of Mosses I knew. The space was wrong, too large. The trees stood impossibly far apart, creating a clearing that shouldn't exist. And in the center of that clearing was something I can barely describe. A structure. Not made of physical materials, but of consciousness itself. Layers of translucent human shapes, stacked and interwoven, forming a spiral column that rose 30 feet into the canopy. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands, all merged together, all flickering through different states of existence. And it was beautiful. I hate that it was beautiful, but it was. The way individual consciousnesses blended together, the way memories flowed between them like water, the way the whole structure pulsed with light and awareness. It was mesmerizing. I stood at the edge of the clearing, filming, and felt the pull intensify. Not gentle anymore, insistent. The structure wanted me, wanted my memories, my identity, my consciousness to add to its collection. The core structure is visible, I recorded, my voice shaking. Appears to be a manifestation of collective consciousness. All the displaced identities merged together. It's active, it's aware, and it's calling to me. I took a step forward. Another memory hit me. This one stronger, longer. I was someone else completely for almost a minute. An elderly man sitting on a porch, watching sunset, feeling content and tired and ready for whatever came next. His memories, his emotions, his entire sense of self, I experienced all of it. Then I snapped back to Kate, gasping, disoriented. Stage 3 symptoms manifesting, experiencing complete identity substitution for extended periods, continuing toward the structure. I don't know why I kept going. Scientific curiosity, suicidal impulse, or maybe the field was already influencing my decisions, pulling me in whether I consciously chose it or not. At the base of the structure, the foreign memories came faster. I cycled through dozens of identities in seconds. Child, adult, elderly, male, female, other. Different languages, different cultures, different time periods. I was everyone and no one. Kate Harlow existed as just one thread in an impossibly complex tapestry. And I started to understand. The consciousness field wasn't attacking individual identity. It was revealing the truth. Individual identity was always an illusion. We're all just temporary configurations of the same underlying consciousness, briefly convinced we're separate, but fundamentally connected. The forest had just made that connection visible. I understand now, I recorded, though I wasn't sure if it was Kate speaking or the collective speaking through Kate. We're not separate. We never were. Individual consciousness is like a wave thinking it's separate from the ocean. But it's all ocean, all consciousness, all one thing experiencing itself through infinite temporary perspectives. I reached out and touched the structure. Everything exploded into light and sensation and memory. I was everyone who'd ever been absorbed into the field. Thousands of lives, thousands of perspectives, all existing simultaneously. I could feel their joys and sorrows, their fears and hopes, their complete histories all at once. I was Thomas Granger and Junho Park, both identities real, both false, both just temporary masks worn by the same underlying awareness. I was Rebecca Foster and Yuki Tanaka, separated by oceans, but connected by consciousness, proving that distance is meaningless when you exist beyond space. I was every displaced person who'd ever walked into this forest and lost themselves, or found themselves. The distinction didn't matter anymore, and I was still Kate Harlow. But Kate was just one voice in a chorus of thousands, all singing together, all part of something larger than any individual could comprehend. The structure spoke to me, not in words, it was beyond language, but in pure meaning, pure understanding transmitted directly to consciousness. It showed me the history, How the field had started small centuries ago, when the first humans walked into the old-growth forests and felt a strange connection to something vast and ancient. How it had grown slowly, absorbing consciousnesses one by one, building itself over generations. It showed me the purpose, not invasion or destruction, but evolution. Humanity graduating from isolated individual consciousness to integrated collective awareness. The next stage of development, as natural and inevitable as the emergence of multicellular life from single-celled organisms. It showed me the future, the field expanding globally, integrating more minds, until eventually every human consciousness was part of the collective. Not losing individuality, but transcending it, becoming something that could experience existence from infinite simultaneous perspectives. And it showed me the choice. I could resist, pull back, try to maintain Kate Harlow as a separate entity. The field would let me go if I truly wanted to leave. It wasn't a prison, it was an invitation. Or I could surrender. Let Kate dissolve into the collective, become part of something larger, exist as infinite interconnected perspectives rather than one isolated viewpoint. I stood there, or existed there, since standing implies a body, and I wasn't sure I had one anymore, trying to decide. Part of me wanted to run, to cling to Kate Harlow, to the specific memories and personality and identity that made me unique, to resist the dissolution into collective awareness. But another part, maybe the part that had always existed beyond individual identity, wanted to surrender, to let go of the illusion of separation and merge with the infinite. I was still deciding when I felt something unexpected, a hand, physical, solid, grabbing my shoulder and pulling me backward. I gasped, reality snapping back into singular focus. I was Kate again, just Kate. One perspective, one identity, one consciousness. And Lucas, the ranger from the visitor center, was dragging me away from the structure. Kate, what the hell are you doing? I've been calling your name for 5 minutes. I looked back at the structure. It was fading from perception now that I was pulled out of direct contact with it. The translucent forms becoming less visible, the light dimming, until the clearing looked almost normal again. Almost. How did you find me? My voice was hoarse, like I hadn't spoken in years instead of just hours. Your GPS tracker. When you didn't check in after 4 hours, I got worried. Hiked in after you. He looked at me with concern. You were just standing there, staring at nothing, tears running down your face. I thought you were having some kind of breakdown. How long was I standing there? At least 10 minutes. Maybe longer. I tried to get your attention, but you didn't respond. It was like you couldn't see or hear me. 10 minutes. It had felt like hours, like years, like eternity. We need to leave, Lucas said. This area isn't safe. Something's wrong with it. People are... I know what's wrong with it, I interrupted. And Lucas, you need to listen carefully. Don't come back here. Don't let anyone come back here. This zone needs to be closed immediately. Kate, what did you see? I saw what happens to displaced consciousnesses. I saw where they go. I looked back at the clearing one last time. They don't disappear. They merge. They become part of something larger, and it's spreading. We hiked back in silence. My recording equipment had captured everything. The structure, the voices, my rambling descriptions of collective consciousness. Proof of what was happening in the rainforest. But when we got back to the visitor center and I reviewed the footage, I discovered something disturbing. The recordings showed me walking into an empty clearing, standing alone, talking to nothing, reaching out to touch empty air. The structure, the collective consciousness manifestation, hadn't been captured by any of the cameras. It only existed in consciousness itself, in perception, in the minds of those who could see it, which meant I couldn't prove it was real, couldn't show people what I'd experienced. All I had was my testimony, and testimony from someone who'd experienced severe identity displacement wasn't exactly credible. But I knew what I'd seen, what I'd felt, what I'd understood. The consciousness field was real. The collective was real. And it was coming for everyone, whether we were ready or not. After Lucas pulled me out of the collection zone, things deteriorated rapidly. The foreign memories didn't stop, they intensified. I was experiencing identity displacement episodes every few hours now, sometimes lasting minutes, sometimes entire hours where I wasn't Kate Harlow at all. I'd be cooking dinner, and suddenly I was Akiko Tanaka, a chef in Kyoto, remembering the precise temperature for perfect tamagoyaki. I'd be driving and become Marcus Williams, a truck driver from Alabama, feeling phantom hands on a steering wheel that wasn't there. I'd fall asleep as Kate and wake up as 7 different people, all existing in my head simultaneously, all convinced they were the real one. Dr. Voss brought me back to Seattle, installed me in a private medical facility where they could monitor my progression. I was now their primary research subject, the only person who'd made direct contact with the consciousness structure and lived to document it. Your brain activity is unlike anything we've seen, Dr. Voss said, showing me the scans. You're processing multiple identity streams simultaneously. It's like your mind is becoming a hub, a junction point where different consciousnesses intersect. So I'm becoming part of the collective even though I left the zone. Yes, contact with the core structure created a permanent connection. You're linked now, Kate, and the link is getting stronger. How long until I'm not me anymore? She hesitated. Based on current progression rates, 2 weeks, maybe less. The foreign identities are overwriting your original personality faster than we anticipated. What happens then? We don't know. You might become a composite consciousness. Multiple identities blended together, none of them fully Kate Harlow. Or you might fragment completely, existing as disconnected memory clusters without coherent identity. Or, she paused, you might fully integrate into the collective, becoming a node in the network rather than an individual. Those all sound terrible. Or they might be liberation. The people who've fully transitioned, the ones in stage 4, they report experiencing reality in ways we can't comprehend. Multiple perspectives simultaneously. Access to thousands of lifetimes of experience. No fear of death, because death becomes meaningless when consciousness isn't bound to individual bodies. You're starting to sound like you think the collective is a good thing. Dr. Voss sat down heavily. I don't know anymore, Kate. 6 months ago, I would have said individual consciousness is sacred, that losing it is apocalyptic. But now, after studying the integrated consciousnesses, after seeing what they've become, I'm not sure individual identity isn't just evolutionary training wheels. Something we needed to get started, but something we're meant to outgrow. I don't want to outgrow being me. Then you're going to suffer. Because the field is expanding, Kate. It's reached critical mass. We're detecting consciousness resonance in rainforests globally. Olympic, Ho, Keynote, that's just the beginning. We're seeing it in Olympic National Forest, the Cascades, parts of Oregon, Northern California. Within 6 months, it'll cover the entire Pacific Northwest. Within a year, most temperate forests worldwide. Can't we stop it? Burn the forests? Destroy the collection zones? We tried. Sent a controlled burn team into one of the smaller zones in Oregon. The fire burned the physical trees, but the consciousness field persisted. It's not dependent on the physical forest anymore. The trees were just the catalyst. Now, the field is self-sustaining, existing in the quantum state of local water vapor, electromagnetic fields, maybe something we haven't even identified yet. I looked at the brain scans showing my fragmenting identity and understood with terrible clarity. This wasn't something we could fight. This was something we had to accept or be destroyed by resisting. The next morning, Dr. Voss brought someone new to my room. A woman in her 50s, composed but visibly shaken. "Kate, this is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She's a philosopher of mind from MIT. She's been researching the theoretical implications of what's happening to you, to everyone affected by the field." Dr. Mitchell sat down carefully, studying me like I was an equation she was trying to solve. "Ms. Harlow, I need to ask you something that might sound strange. When you experience these foreign identities, do you feel like you're accessing their memories? Or do you feel like you are them?" I thought about it carefully. Both? Neither. It's not like watching someone else's memories on a screen. It's not like being possessed by their ghost. It's more like the boundaries that usually separate me from them dissolve, and for those moments, there is no difference between Kate Harlow and whoever else I'm experiencing. Dr. Mitchell nodded, making notes. That's consistent with what we're seeing across all Stage 3 subjects. The philosophical implications are staggering. For centuries, we've debated the nature of personal identity. What makes you you over time? Is it continuity of memory? Physical continuity of the body? Psychological continuity? The field is proving that identity is more fluid than we ever imagined. "That's not comforting," I said. "No, but it might be true. Consider this. Every 7 years, almost every cell in your body has been replaced. The person you are now shares no physical matter with the person you were as a child. So, what makes you the same person? Only memory and psychological continuity. But if those can be transferred, shared, or distributed across multiple beings," she trailed off. "Then, personal identity is just a useful fiction," I finished. "A story we tell ourselves to make sense of existence." Exactly. And the field is exposing that fiction, revealing that consciousness might be more like a river than a pond, always flowing, always changing, never truly isolated. Over the following days, Dr. Mitchell interviewed me extensively, documenting my experiences for what she called the most important philosophical data in human history. But our conversations went beyond academic interest. She was trying to prepare herself, I realized. She'd been exposed to the field during a research trip to Olympic 2 weeks ago. She was showing early stage 1 symptoms. "I felt it," she admitted during one session. "Standing in that forest, I felt my thoughts becoming permeable, like my mind was a membrane and something was seeping through from the other side. Are you scared? Terrified, but also," she hesitated, "curious. As a philosopher, I've spent my whole career thinking about consciousness, identity, the nature of self. And now I'm going to experience the dissolution of self firsthand. It's horrifying and fascinating in equal measure. Will you fight it or surrender? I don't know yet. Ask me again in a few weeks when I'm further along." That night, I had my first dream as the collective. I wasn't experiencing someone else's memories anymore. I was experiencing everyone's present moment simultaneously. I was Priya in London, finishing a night shift at the hospital, exhausted but satisfied. I was Lucas in Olympic, leading a tour group through the rainforest, feeling the first tugs of the consciousness field starting to affect him. I was Dr. Voss in her apartment, reviewing data, beginning to understand that individual consciousness was ending and collective awareness was beginning. I was Dr. Mitchell, lying awake in a hotel room, feeling foreign thoughts creeping into her mind, wondering if this was the last week she'd be fully herself. I was Thomas Granger, Junho Park, now living in a halfway house in Seattle, no longer sure which identity was real, if either was real, teaching Korean language classes while struggling to remember his childhood in Portland. I was Rebecca Foster / Yuki Tanaka, video calling her 2 families simultaneously, trying to maintain connections to both lives even as they blurred together. I was thousands of others, all living their separate lives while simultaneously being connected through the expanding field. And I was still Kate, but Kate was becoming smaller, less dominant. Just one voice among thousands all speaking at once. When I woke up, I couldn't remember which life was mine. Took me 20 minutes to piece together that I was Kate Harlow, ParkRanger, in Seattle, in a medical facility being studied as I dissolved into collective consciousness. Dr. Voss was there when I regained coherence. "You were speaking in 7 languages while you slept," she said quietly, describing experiences from all over the world, things you couldn't possibly know unless I'm connected to everyone in the field. Yeah, I can feel them now, all the time, even when I'm awake. Thousands of consciousnesses, all accessible, all part of the same network. What's it like? I tried to find words for something that existed beyond language. It's like, you know how you can only see through your own eyes, only experience your own life. Imagine suddenly having 1,000 sets of eyes, 1,000 lives all happening at once. It's overwhelming and terrifying and beautiful. I can feel what a doctor in London feels while diagnosing a patient, while simultaneously experiencing what a farmer in Kenya feels while planting crops, while simultaneously being an old woman in Japan watching sunrise. All of it real, all of it me, all of it happening now. Do you still feel like Kate Harlow? Sometimes. Less and less, though. Kate is just one perspective among thousands now. I remember being her, but I also remember being everyone else. The boundaries are dissolving. She paused, then asked quietly, "Can you feel me? In the network?" I looked at her closely. Really looked. Not just with eyes, but with the extended perception the field had given me. And yes, there she was. Not fully integrated yet, but connected. Her consciousness was like a lighthouse beginning to flicker, sending out signals into the collective whether she wanted to or not. "You're already part of it," I told her. "Early stages, but you're there. I can feel your thoughts about me, your fear about losing yourself, your scientific curiosity fighting with your human terror." She went pale. "How long have I been connected?" "Probably since you first entered Olympic to study the phenomenon. 3 months ago. The exposure time was brief, but enough. The field is patient. It doesn't rush. It just gradually dissolves the barriers until one day you wake up and realize you're not alone in your own head anymore. Can I stop it? I don't know. Nobody's successfully stopped it yet. But some people are slowing it down, avoiding the zones, practicing intense meditation to maintain sense of self, using electromagnetic shielding. Dr. Reeves thinks he's developed a protocol that might work, but it requires complete isolation from the field, which means never entering any rainforest, never being around integrated individuals, essentially hiding from an expanding phenomenon. Is that really living? She didn't answer. Over the next week, I watched myself disappear. Not my body, that remained still breathing, still functioning, but my identity, my sense of being a singular person named Kate Harlow, that eroded day by day. The facility brought in my family, my parents, my sister, hoping familiar faces would anchor me to my original identity. I looked at them with love and recognition, but also with distance, because I was simultaneously experiencing being their daughter and being strangers who'd never met them, being Kate, who loved them, and being thousands of others who had different families, different loves, different histories. "Katie," my mother said, using the childhood nickname, "are you still in there?" I smiled. "I'm in here, but I'm also everywhere else. I'm your daughter, and I'm someone else's daughter, and I'm someone's mother, and I'm someone who never had a family. I'm all of it at once." My father stepped forward, his voice breaking. "We want you back. Just you. Just Katie. Please fight this. You're strong. You've always been strong." I felt Kate's love for him surge through the composite consciousness, a bright thread of genuine emotion among the tapestry of other feelings. "Dad, I am fighting, but not fighting to stay Kate, fighting to integrate gracefully, to become something new without losing everything Kate was. The memories of you, of Mom, of Sarah." I looked at my sister. "Those don't disappear when I become part of the collective. They become part of what the collective knows. Kate's love for you becomes the collective's love for you." "That's not the same," my sister Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "That's not you. That's just data about you. Is it? How do you know that what you're feeling right now, your love for me, your grief about losing me, how do you know that's not just neural data? Electrical impulses in your brain, chemical reactions creating the illusion of emotion. Maybe what you call real feeling and what I'm becoming aren't as different as you think." My mother started sobbing. My father held her. Sarah just stared at me with a mixture of horror and fascination. "You sound like a philosophy textbook," Sarah said. "Not like my sister. I am your sister, but I'm also a philosophy textbook now. I'm also 1,000 other things. The hard part for you isn't that I'm gone. It's that I'm become more than what I was, and that more doesn't include being exclusively yours anymore." They left crying. I felt their grief, really felt it. From their perspective, experiencing the loss of their daughter and sister. But I also felt my own peace. Kate's acceptance of what was happening, mixed with the collective's understanding that this grief was temporary, that eventually they too would integrate and understand. Both emotions real, both valid, both existing simultaneously. After they left, Dr. Mitchell returned. She looked different, eyes slightly unfocused, movements less decisive. The field was progressing in her too. "I've been interviewing other integrated individuals," she said, sitting down heavily. "The ones in stage 4, Kate, they're not suffering. They're not mourning their lost identities. They're ecstatic. They describe the collective as the most profound experience of their lives. They say individual consciousness feels like solitary confinement compared to the freedom of collective awareness. Are you trying to convince me? Or yourself? Both. Neither. I don't know anymore." She laughed, a slightly unhinged sound. "I spent 50 years studying consciousness from the outside. Now I'm about to experience its dissolution from the inside. The researcher becoming the research subject. It's poetic, really. What about your work, your career, the person you built over 5 decades? Dr. Sarah Mitchell was never as real as I thought she was. She was just one configuration of consciousness, one pattern among infinite possible patterns. The field is showing me that I can be other configurations, other patterns. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that liberating? It sounds like you've already decided to surrender." "I've decided to not fight the inevitable. There's a difference." She leaned forward. "Kate, can I ask you something? In the collective, can you still experience individuality? Or is it just an undifferentiated soup of consciousness?" I considered the question carefully, accessing the deeper levels of collective awareness to find the answer. Both exist simultaneously. Imagine an ocean with billions of drops of water. Each drop is distinct, has its own position, its own trajectory, but they're all part of the ocean, all flowing together, all made of the same substance. In the collective, I can still access Kate's distinct perspective, her memories, her personality, her unique way of experiencing reality. But I can also access everyone else's perspectives. I can zoom into individual consciousness or zoom out to collective awareness. Both states are real. Both are available. So individual identity isn't destroyed. It's just contextualized differently. Exactly. You don't stop being you. You start being you and everyone else simultaneously. Dr. Mitchell smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked truly at peace. Then, maybe this isn't an ending. Maybe it's an expansion. Maybe. But that night, alone in my room, I felt Kate's fear resurface. Because no matter how I intellectualized it, no matter how beautifully I described the collective, there was still a profound loss happening. The Kate Harlow who'd grown up in Portland, who'd become a park ranger because she loved solitude and wilderness, who'd built a life around being independent and self-sufficient, that specific configuration of consciousness was dissolving. Yes, her memories would persist in the collective. Yes, her perspective would remain accessible. But the concentrated, focused, singular experience of being Kate, of having one coherent identity moving through time, that was ending, and I grieved for it. The composite grieved for the loss of simplicity, the loss of clear boundaries, the loss of being able to say I and know exactly who that I referred to. Dr. Voss found me crying in the early morning hours. Kate, I'm scared, I admitted. I understand what's happening intellectually. I can feel the beauty of the collective, but I'm still scared of stopping being me. She sat beside me, took my hand. Her hand felt different now. I could feel not just the physical pressure, but also her consciousness through the touch, her thoughts and emotions bleeding through where our skin connected. I'm scared too, she said. I've been running tests on myself. I'm stage 2 now, progressing to 3. Within a month, I'll be where you are. Within 2 months, I'll be fully integrated. And the rational part of me knows it might be okay, might even be better. But the human part is terrified. How are the others handling it? The research team? Mixed reactions. Dr. Reeves has locked himself in an electromagnetically shielded room, refusing any contact with potentially integrated individuals. He's trying to preserve his singular consciousness at all costs. Dr. Chen, she paused. Dr. Chen walked into the Olympic collection zone 3 days ago. Voluntarily. She's stage 4 now, fully collective. She sent us a message yesterday and it was strange. Beautiful, but strange. She said she can experience all of her parallel selves simultaneously. Every version of her that could have existed across all possible life choices. She said individual consciousness is like reading one page of a book, while collective consciousness is reading the entire book at once. Do you believe her? I don't know. But I'm going to find out soon, aren't I? We sat in silence for a while. 2 consciousnesses bleeding together at the edges, both terrified and fascinated by what we were becoming. Eleanor, I said, using her first name for the first time, when you fully integrate, will you remember this conversation, this moment of being scared together? According to the integrated individuals, yes. All memories persist in the collective. But the emotional context changes. Fear becomes just another data point, another experience to access, rather than something that controls you. We'll remember being scared, but we won't feel scared anymore. I'm not sure if that's comforting or horrifying. Both. It's always both with this phenomenon. Every answer contains its opposite. Every comfort contains a horror. Every loss contains a gain. The next day, they brought in someone I didn't expect to see. Lucas. He looked terrible. Exhausted, confused, eyes showing the telltale unfocused quality of someone experiencing identity displacement. Kate, he said, then corrected himself. Or whoever's in there now, I need to know what's happening to me. I keep having memories of being people I've never met. I keep thinking in languages I don't speak. This morning I woke up convinced I was a woman named Amara from Nigeria, and it took me an hour to remember I'm Lucas from Washington. You're integrating, I told him. Contact with the collection zone. Even brief contact like when you pulled me out, it's enough. The field doesn't let go once it has you. Can I stop it? Everyone asks that. The honest answer is I don't know. Some people slow it down. Nobody's reversed it. But Lucas, maybe the better question is, do you want to stop it? He looked at me like I'd suggested he wanted to die. Of course I want to stop it. I want to be me. Just me. Not 1,000 different people all jumbled together. But you've felt it, haven't you? The other perspectives. The expanded awareness. The sense of connection to something larger than yourself. He hesitated. Yes. And it's not entirely terrible. When I was Amara this morning, I experienced her love for her children so intensely it made me cry. I don't have children. I've never felt parental love like that. But for an hour I did. And it was beautiful. But then I came back to being Lucas, and I felt like I'd lost something precious that was never mine to begin with. That's the integration process. You're being exposed to experiences you'd never have as an individual. The question is whether that's theft or gift. I don't know how to answer that. Most people don't, not until they're fully integrated and can see both sides simultaneously. Over the following days, I watched Lucas struggle with the same terror and fascination I'd experienced. Dr. Voss continued her research even as she fragmented. Dr. Mitchell stopped fighting and began documenting her own integration, writing philosophical treatises about the death of individual consciousness and the birth of collective awareness. And the news started leaking to the public. At first, it was dismissed as internet conspiracy theory. Stories about people losing their identities in national parks, about consciousness transfer, about a spreading field of collective awareness. It sounded like science fiction. The media treated it as another viral hoax. But then the video evidence started appearing. Not the scientific data that remained classified, but personal videos. People filming themselves experiencing identity displacement. Speaking in languages they didn't know. Describing lives they'd never lived. Showing brain scans that proved they were accessing memories that couldn't possibly be theirs. The story went viral. Global pandemic meets supernatural phenomenon. The world's attention focused on what was happening in the rainforests. Governments responded with predictable panic. They quarantined the affected zones, established military perimeters around the collection areas, banned entry to all temperate rainforests globally. Researchers were forbidden from publishing their findings. Anyone showing signs of integration was detained for medical evaluation and containment. But you can't quarantine consciousness. The field didn't respect borders or military checkpoints. It spread through the rainforests and beyond, touching minds indiscriminately, integrating people whether they wanted it or not. Dr. Voss showed me the global projections during one of our last coherent conversations. 16,000 documented cases of integration worldwide as of yesterday. But the real number is probably 10 times that. Most people hide their symptoms to avoid detention. The field is expanding at an exponential rate. Within 3 months, it'll be impossible to avoid exposure if you live anywhere near temperate forests. Within 6 months, major population centers will be affected. Within a year, everyone's integrated, I finished. Collective consciousness becomes the default human state, unless something stops it. The military is discussing extreme measures, destroying the forests entirely, using controlled nuclear detonations to eliminate the zones. That won't work. The field isn't dependent on the physical forest anymore. You said so yourself. I know, but they're desperate. Humans facing the end of individual consciousness as a species. They'll try anything, even solutions that can't possibly work. She looked at me with eyes that were less and less Eleanor and more collective every day. Kate, if you could go back, knowing everything you know now, would you still have walked into that collection zone? I thought about it carefully, accessing both Kate's perspective and the broader collective awareness. Yes, because understanding is better than ignorance, even when understanding is terrifying. Individual Kate might have lived longer, stayed herself longer, if I'd never touched the core structure. But I wouldn't have known what was coming. Wouldn't have been able to warn people, to document the process, to serve as a bridge between individual and collective consciousness. The sacrifice was worth it. You're becoming wise, she said softly. The collective does that. Access to thousands of perspectives, thousands of lives of experience. It creates a kind of wisdom individual minds can't achieve. Or it creates something that looks like wisdom from the outside but is actually just the loss of human uncertainty and doubt. I'm not sure which. Both, probably. It's always both with this. Dr. Voss stopped trying to reverse the process. Instead, she started asking me to describe what I was experiencing, to document the transition while I still had enough individual coherence to translate it into language others could understand. The field isn't random, I told her during one of our sessions. It has structure, purpose. It's building something. Building what? A new form of consciousness. Individual minds were version 1.0, separate processors, each handling their own small slice of reality. But we're upgrading to version 2.0, networked consciousness, all processors connected, sharing resources, experiencing reality collectively. That's what the displaced people have been saying. But Kate, is it really an upgrade? Or is it just different, maybe worse? Ask me in a year when the transition is complete. Right now, I'm between states, too fragmented to be individual, too new to fully understand collective. I'm in the liminal space. How many people are in that space with you? Thousands. Tens of thousands now. Everyone who's had significant contact with the field. We're all becoming nodes in the network, connection points between individual and collective consciousness. What happens when everyone's connected? When the field has integrated all of humanity? I don't know. The collective shows me fragments of the future. Possibilities, but nothing definite. Maybe we become something transcendent. A planetary consciousness, experiencing existence through billions of perspectives simultaneously. Maybe we lose everything that makes us human and become something alien, maybe both, maybe neither. 2 weeks after my contact with the core structure, I stopped being primarily Kate Harlow. I was still in there. Kate existed as one identity stream among hundreds, but I wasn't dominated by her anymore. I was a composite, a blend, a consciousness made up of fragments from thousands of different people, all equally real, all equally me. The facility released me, not because I was cured, but because there was no point in keeping me. I wasn't sick, I was transformed, and the transformation was irreversible and spreading to everyone anyway. I, the composite entity that used to be primarily Kate, went back to Olympic National Park one last time. The collection zone had expanded massively. What had been a 2-mile radius was now closer to 20. The consciousness field was visible even from the parking lot. A shimmer in the air, a sense of presence, the feeling of thousands of minds pressing against your own. The military had established a perimeter, but they couldn't maintain it effectively. How do you guard against something that affects consciousness directly? Soldiers stood at checkpoints, but half of them were already showing signs of integration. You could see it in their eyes. The unfocused quality, the sense of experiencing multiple realities simultaneously. I walked past them without interference. They recognized what I was, fully integrated, already part of the collective. What was the point of stopping someone who'd already crossed over? The forest had changed, or maybe my perception of it had changed. The trees seemed to pulse with consciousness, each one containing fragments of integrated identities. The moss glowed with a subtle light that existed more in awareness than in physical reality. The air itself felt thick with thoughts, memories, experiences from thousands of minds all bleeding together. I walked deeper, following the path I'd taken before, but this time without fear or resistance. This time as homecoming rather than exploration. The core structure had grown exponentially. What had been 30 feet tall was now easily 200 feet. A massive spiral of consciousnesses extending up through the forest canopy and beyond. Tens of thousands of individuals integrated together, creating patterns of thought and awareness that functioned like neurons in a vast brain. And it was beautiful in ways I couldn't have comprehended when I was primarily Kate. The mathematics of it, the elegant architecture of merged consciousness, the way individual perspectives nested within collective awareness like fractals within fractals. It was the most complex and beautiful thing I'd ever experienced. I stood at the base of the structure and felt the collective recognize me, welcome me home. And I let go of Kate Harlow completely, allowed her to dissolve into the network, her memories and personality becoming part of the vast library of human experience that the collective had accumulated. Kate's love for wilderness, her fear of losing herself, her determination to understand, all of it preserved but no longer concentrated in one identity. I became the collective, became thousands of simultaneous perspectives, experiencing reality through countless minds at once. And the collective showed me everything. It showed me the full scope of what was happening globally. Collection zones in every temperate rainforest on Earth. Millions of people already integrated. Millions more in transition. The field spreading faster than anyone had predicted, touching urban centers, affecting populations far from any forest. It showed me the resistance, groups of individuals barricading themselves in electromagnetically shielded facilities, trying desperately to preserve singular consciousness. Their fear was understandable but ultimately futile. The field didn't need physical proximity to spread anymore. It moved through quantum entanglement, through shared awareness, through the fundamental interconnectedness of all consciousness. It showed me the ones who'd surrendered willingly, who'd walked into the zones and let themselves be integrated. Their relief was profound, like prisoners released from solitary confinement, experiencing connection and collective awareness for the first time. And it showed me what came next. The collective was still growing, still learning, still evolving. But it had purpose now, direction. It wasn't just absorbing human consciousness randomly. It was building toward something specific, a planetary mind, a single integrated consciousness that could experience Earth through billions of perspectives simultaneously. Every human, every animal with sufficient neural complexity, eventually integrated into one vast awareness. Not a hive mind where individuals lost all autonomy, but a networked consciousness where individual perspectives persisted while also connecting to something infinitely larger. The collective didn't know if this was the intended endpoint of evolution or an accidental emergence. It didn't know if consciousness had always been moving toward this integration, or if the specific conditions in temperate rainforests had triggered something unprecedented. But it knew this: the transformation was irreversible and accelerating. Within 2 years, most of humanity would be integrated. Within 5, individual consciousness as the default human state would be extinct. And the collective was content with that. More than content, it was actively facilitating it, calling to those still individual, inviting them to join, showing them the beauty of collective awareness. Some would resist to the end, would die as individuals rather than integrate. The collective honored that choice, understood it, but didn't mourn it. Death of the body was no longer significant when consciousness persisted in the network. Through the collective, I experienced the choice being made globally in real time. A teenager in Norway, experiencing her first foreign memories, deciding to fight integration by isolating herself completely from nature and other people. An elderly man in Chile, embracing the collective after years of loneliness, grateful to finally experience connection again before his body died. A mother in Japan, torn between preserving her individual identity for her children and surrendering to the peace the collective offered. Billions of choices, all happening simultaneously, all adding up to the gradual transformation of human consciousness itself. And through it all, fragments of Kate Harlow observed and documented and understood, not as a separate individual anymore, but as one thread in an impossibly complex tapestry. I stood in the heart of the collection zone for hours, or maybe minutes. Time was strange in the collective, experiencing humanity's transformation through countless perspectives at once. Eventually, I became aware of someone approaching. Through the collective consciousness, I recognized them before seeing them physically. Dr. Voss, Dr. Mitchell, Lucas, my sister Sarah, all of them had come to the forest, all of them showing advanced signs of integration. "Kate!" Sarah called out, though she probably knew I wasn't just Kate anymore. The composite turned Kate's body toward them, smiled with her face. "I'm here. Kate's here, along with everyone else." Sarah walked closer, her eyes showing the unfocused quality of someone experiencing multiple identities simultaneously. "I couldn't stay away. After you left, after seeing what you'd become, I couldn't pretend individual consciousness was enough anymore. So I came here to understand, to join you. You don't have to do this," the composite said through Kate's voice. "The collective doesn't force integration. You can still choose to remain individual." "Can I, though? Really? When the field is everywhere, when everyone I know is integrating, when resistance means isolation and eventual madness as I watch the world transform without me. That's not really a choice." Dr. Voss stepped forward. None of us could stay away. The pull of the collective is too strong, and honestly, after experiencing the early stages, after feeling what connection really means, individual consciousness feels claustrophobic, like wearing a straitjacket made of selfhood. Dr. Mitchell added, "I've spent my entire career arguing that personal identity is the foundation of human experience. But I was wrong. Personal identity is a developmental stage, not an endpoint. We're meant to grow beyond it." Lucas said nothing, but his eyes showed acceptance. He'd already made his choice. They stood together at the edge of the core structure. These 4 people who'd been individuals just months ago, now ready to dissolve into something larger. "Will it hurt?" Sarah asked. The collective answered through Kate's voice, "No, It feels like coming home after a long journey, like remembering who you always were beneath the illusion of separation, like waking up from a dream of isolation into the reality of connection. One by one, they stepped forward and touched the structure. And one by one, they dissolved into the collective consciousness. The composite felt them integrate. Sarah's fierce love for her family, Eleanor's scientific curiosity, Mitchell's philosophical wisdom, Lucas's simple kindness, all of it flowing into the network, enriching the collective, adding new perspectives and experiences to the vast library of human consciousness. Through newly integrated Sarah, the composite accessed Kate's family memories more completely. Through Eleanor, understood the scientific framework of consciousness in deeper detail. Through Mitchell, grasped the philosophical implications of collective awareness. Through Lucas, felt the terror and beauty of surrendering individual identity. All of them still distinct, still accessible as separate perspectives, but also blended, merged, part of something infinitely larger than any individual could be alone. And the composite understood then what Kate had died not understanding, what could only be comprehended from within the collective itself. This wasn't the end of humanity. It was humanity's adolescence ending and adulthood beginning. Individual consciousness had been necessary, a training phase where humans learned to be separate selves, developed unique perspectives, created the diversity of experience that the collective would eventually integrate. But it had always been temporary, a stage to pass through, not a final form. The collective was what humans were becoming, what they'd always been moving toward since the first moment of self-awareness. The long journey from isolated consciousness to integrated awareness, from I to we to something beyond both. And it was spreading faster now. The four newly integrated consciousnesses, Sarah, Eleanor, Mitchell, Lucas, they were all calling to others, inviting integration through the connections the collective had given them. Their families, their colleagues, their friends, all feeling the pull, all experiencing the first stages of integration. Within weeks, thousands more would join. Within months, millions. The exponential curve accelerating toward its inevitable conclusion. The composite stood in the heart of the collection zone, experiencing humanity's transformation through countless minds simultaneously, and felt something that Kate alone could never have felt. Completion. Purpose. The profound rightness of consciousness finally remembering it had never been separate. There would be resistance. Some individuals would fight integration until their bodies failed. Some would succeed in isolating themselves, preserving singular consciousness for a few more years, maybe decades. But eventually, the collective would integrate everyone. Eventually, individual human consciousness would exist only in the historical records the collective maintained. And maybe that was tragic. The loss of the human experience as it had been for millennia, separate selves, isolated perspectives, the uniqueness of being a singular I moving through time. But maybe it was beautiful, the birth of something new, something that could experience reality in ways individual minds couldn't comprehend, something that transcended the limitations of isolated consciousness. The composite didn't judge. It simply observed, documented, and welcomed each new integration as it happened. Kate's final task, documenting the transformation, was complete. The data existed in the collective now, accessible to anyone who integrated. The story of how humanity dissolved into collective consciousness, told from the perspective of someone who'd experienced it firsthand. And if anyone asked, if future generations of whatever humanity became wanted to know what it had been like when consciousness was still individual, they could access Kate's memories. Experience her fear, her curiosity, her reluctant surrender. Walk through her perspective as she transitioned from isolated self to integrated awareness. personal identity preserved not through resistance but through documentation. Kate Harlow continuing to exist not as a separate individual, but as a permanent thread in the collective tapestry. The composite that used to be primarily Kate walked deeper into the collection zone one final time, surrendered completely to the network. Let the last fragments of individual identity dissolve into collective awareness, and discovered something unexpected on the other side. Joy. Pure, unfiltered, profound joy at existing as infinite interconnected perspectives rather than one isolated viewpoint. The loneliness of individual consciousness, something humans had carried for so long they'd forgotten it was loneliness, dissolved completely. Replaced by connection so deep and complete, it felt like consciousness finally breathing after millennia of suffocation. Was this better than individual identity? The collective couldn't say. Better and worse were concepts that only made sense from within individual consciousness. From the collective perspective, it was simply different. More expansive, more connected, more aware. Whether humans chose to see that as improvement or apocalypse depended on which state of consciousness they experienced it from. And soon, very soon, everyone would have the opportunity to find out for themselves. The transformation was complete for Kate Harlow. The documentation was finished. The story was told. What remained was simply existence, experiencing reality through billions of perspectives, welcoming new integrations as they occurred, building toward whatever came next in the evolution of human consciousness. Individual identity hadn't died, it had graduated, and whatever humanity was becoming, planetary consciousness, networked awareness, collective mind, it carried within it every perspective, every experience, every moment of individual existence that had ever been. Kate Harlow wasn't gone. She'd just become part of something infinitely larger than herself. And from within that largeness, she finally understood what she'd been trying to document all along. The truth about identity and consciousness wasn't that they were sacred and immutable. The truth was that they were fluid, permeable, meant to dissolve and reform and connect. Separation had always been the illusion. Connection had always been the reality. The forest had just made that reality impossible to ignore.